Welcome to the From the Core Workbook Series podcast, where we support those going on a journey, an excavation journey to the core of who you are, so that you can stand on a firm foundation, knowing who you are at the core of your being and walking into a future full of hope. That is the work that we're doing in this podcast, but more importantly, in the From the Core Workbook Series. If you don't have your set, and it's a set of 4 volumes, Reckoning, Healing, Transformation, Hope. Those are the 4 stages of transformation where you transform from the inside out. Through this workbook, you're going to experience 1,300 pages, beautifully designed, wonderfully laid out, totally thoughtfully from beginning to end, walking you through the journey so that you may start at reckoning, but you end in hope, because that is what is spoken over your life. You have a future full of hope. Last time we started going through chapter 1 in the From the Core Workbook series. It's not actually chapter 1. Chapter 1 or chapter 00 is From the Core, where we went through the foundational introduction of this content. So if you haven't gone through that, please go through that now. If you want to pick up your own paperback version, it is 1,300 pages. This entire beast curriculum is 15 pounds. You will get what we call the brick to your house, and it is super heavy, but it is super impactful, and it is full of beautiful imagery and 1,295 questions to help you go on the journey. If you're not into it, you're not into paperback, but you want to go on the journey as well, we've got a digital version for you. All of this can be found at fromthecore.global. If you want to have a visceral experience, but you prefer most of the content to come in digital form, you can buy the digital version and then get the journal. We have a journal that is exactly the same size and shape as the entire curriculum, with some of the same beautiful imagery and design in it, but the pages are blank, so that you can at least have a tactile version if you want. And if you just want to whip out your own notebook, you can do that too. Come along. Now, last time we went through Broken Canvas, which talked about core needs, coping behaviors, creating an alternate life, and the stone cold truth, and the impact of living an alternate life and the consequences that are born out of that. We went through something called the impact formula, where we wrote down our core need. Tony Robbins identified 6 core needs. We wrote down what our core need is, and as we mentioned last time, having a need is totally normal. You're human. You have needs. Meeting it through a coping behavior and having that need come out of a place of brokenness is not. Because that sets up you creating coping behaviors, which is an unhealthy, unproductive way to deal with getting your needs met. It is a brokenness even in meeting of the needs. Once you meet your needs through a coping behavior, you create an alternate life that is not real. It's not based on anything real. When you inhabit a life that is not real, you break trust with yourself. You are living a lie and you know it. So how to get at that and how to break that cycle is by stating the stone cold truth about your life. And in the last session, if you haven't listened to it, please do that. I had you write down your stone cold truth in the comment section. I got real clear with mine, which was I had a medical condition. I was living home and bedbound, and yet I had a closet full of tens of thousands of dollars worth of expensive clothes that I would never wear and never wore. And that was a lie, so that I could step into that closet and feel transported into this other life, living this other life, this other person that was not me, an alternate reality, an illusion, an alternate life. And that life was a lie. It had very real impacts on me financially. It had very real impacts on me emotionally. It broke trust with my partner, who also saw that I was living a lie, and it broke trust with myself. Do the work, write it down. Okay. Now, quite often, a triggering event will go off in our life, sometimes in the form of something wonderful, sometimes in the form of something not so wonderful, but it is a triggering event that starts a cascade, and that cascade insists that we get real about the circumstances of our life. So to trigger is to initiate or set off an explosion. And it comes from the Dutch word trekken, and it means to pull. The thing that initiated an explosion in my life was that I got pregnant. I got pregnant. I was home and bedbound. I was living with a person that sometimes was the only person I would see for months. We were not in a committed relationship. We were in a cohabitation relationship. Committed and cohabitating are not the same thing. If you think that's said from a place of judgment, please think again. I lived with this person for 7 years, and I would go down to the mattresses fighting that was a committed relationship. It was not. And I knew it. And I chose to get pregnant by this person. We planned it. I was on such unstable footing. I was sick. I was homebound. I was often bedbound. If he walked out of my life, I do not know how I would have cared for that child, let alone myself. I was a dependent adult. And I continued to put myself in harm's way. For me, my coping behavior was online shopping. I was spending all this money. I was not going in debt, but I was spending all the money that I made as an executive. I spent on these clothes, which meant that my future was not secure, not financially because of my own coping behavior, and not because I was in a committed, non-committed relationship. And on top of that, I got pregnant. Purposely. Some other triggering events can look like this. And I want to be clear, these are all real. These are all triggering events that somebody told me to my face. A jail sentence, being served divorce papers, coming home and finding your spouse has cleared out your apartment and moved out, your family and friends staging an intervention, or a PTSD event so severe you put a gun in your own mouth, or even worse, to the head of a loved one. These are all real triggering events. These things happened to actual people, and these events may even have happened to you. For some other people, something wonderful happened. Listen, when I saw those 2 lines on that stick, that pregnancy test stick, it felt wonderful. It felt like this newness. It felt elating, but it changed something in that it set off, it ignited, it initiated an explosion, and that explosion was the veil of lie coming down. My alternate life could not stand in the face of this triggering event. So I want you to write down in the blank that I'm going to provide the answer to this sentence. Something wonderful, horrible, life-changing happened. Write down what it was and put a date to it. That is your triggering event. Now, we talked about the stone cold truth in a life. So for me, my stone cold truth when I had to come face to face with my coping behaviors, because I got pregnant, this suddenly created this wait a second, what am I doing? The triggering event had me look backwards at all the things that I was doing, the need that I had, how I was trying to fill it, the alternate life that I had created, the impact of that alternate life, how it broke trust with my partner and broke trust within myself, the consequences of all that, how I was setting myself up for a future that was on unstable footing in so many ways. But that triggering event dropped the veil. And when that veil fell, I saw something even more profound, even deeper. And it was the deeper truth, not the stone cold truth, the deeper truth, the truth underneath the stone. And that was this. Although I was pregnant, the man I was with wasn't committed to me, wasn't committed to the baby, and didn't want to be with me. And that realization set off an explosion in my life and forced me to create different circumstances on more solid ground. What is the deeper truth in your life? First, identify what was the triggering event. My triggering event was that I got pregnant. But it set off an explosion that when the dust settled, I was able to see the deeper truth, which was that my partner wasn't a partner at all and didn't want to be with me and didn't want to provide for me and didn't want to provide for my baby. And I was on unbelievably unsteady ground. Some of it, most of it, I had created myself. What was the triggering event? What is the deeper truth of your life? Write it down. There's this duality here. You have to take personal agency over your own healing. That is a requirement. That is why we did a workbook in the first place. That is why I don't provide coaching services, because I'm not a coach. That is why I'm not a therapist. I'm not accessible in that way, because you would be really not well served if I was your therapist. Let me be really clear about that. It's not my gifting. And furthermore, it's just not my belief. My belief is that you are to take personal agency over your life and responsibility for your life. Now, that may include a therapist. That's fine too. You can walk along this curriculum with a therapist, but you have to be the one that picks up your life and walks forward into a new future. The only thing that's going to heal you is you and God. And if you don't want to talk about God just yet, that's totally fine. When I was at this stage of my life, trust me, I was living with someone. There was no God in my life. There was no moral authority that I was running my decisions by. Not by a long shot. So don't think you're going to have judgment for any of this. But at some point in the future, we're going to have to talk about your relationship with God, because self-awareness and spirituality intersect, and that is just a truth. That is not just a truth. That is not the stone cold truth. That is the deepest truth of a life. That is the truth that sits at the core. But for now, we're going to look at the deeper truth in your life, and you're going to write it down, and you're going to be in community doing so. Okay. The circumstances. The circumstances you're in can have existed for a very long time before they fully come to light. So for me, I was in that relationship for 7 years. For 7 years, I was living a lie about being significant to someone I was not significant to, being connected and in love with someone that was not connected to me, and needing certainty in my life and being the most uncertain in my circumstances that one can imagine. And that went on for 7 years. So listen, you came by it honestly, okay? You've often created these circumstances because you want the core needs so badly. You want significance, love and connection, certainty so badly. And you believe with all your heart that the circumstance you're in is giving you or will give you this core need now or sometime in the future, that you persist. Like year after year after year after year, I was living in this relationship and in this alternate reality because I just believed if I got healthy, if I was able to go outside, if I got pregnant, if I was better, if I loved him more, then the circumstance that I was in would blossom into everything I ever wanted and desired. So I kept going. I settled for a little human connection over no human connection. I settled for a little significance for no significance. I settled for a little bit of love for what I perceived to be no love at all. So don't shame yourself because you've done this thing. You've created this house of cards. There's no shame in this. But it is time to look at it in the face and unveil the deeper truth of your life and your circumstances so that that house of cards can finally come down. And if you're anything like me, it was already down. I just didn't even know it. I need you now to update that impact formula. So for those of you who did part 1, you already know what it is. Go back to wherever you put it in your notes, in your book or whatever. If you're in the workbook, the sequence comes up again on page 76. If you're not in the workbook, here is the formula: core need. And you're going to fill in the blanks. I'm going to read my impact formula that I had to update with my deeper truth. And here's what it is: my core need. I need to have a sense of certainty and significance in my intimate relationship, and I'm not getting it. So it wasn't just about needing connection. Of course, we all need connection, but it was something deeper for me. I was in that relationship in order to have a sense of certainty in an unbelievably uncertain world. I did not know if I was going to live or die in the immediate. Not in some, distant future like we all kind of think when we're young and vibrant and we think, oh, we'll die at some point in time. And yes, I know it can happen at any time, but ultimately most of us think it's far off. For me, it wasn't far off. I had been to the edge of health or illness where you think you're going to die, so much so that thought of death is actually preferable. That's where I had been. It was unbelievably uncertain, and I was desperate for certainty. And so I tried to root my certainty in a relationship that was uncertain. And on top of that, I tried to get this idea of significance met in being significant to the one person that dared to come in my life, that walked through that door every day. So my core need impact formula looks like this: I need to have a sense of certainty and significance in my intimate relationship, and I'm not getting it. So fill in the blank. I need to what? And I'm not getting it. You have to put that trailer on there. You have to end with, and I'm not getting it. You have to see that you have a core need, and you have to also understand you're not getting it. Coping behavior. In order to fill this need, I am coping by, what am I doing? I'm coping by living with someone. Cohabitation, that's what I was doing. So that what? So that I can feel a little bit of certainty and a little bit of significance. So I can avoid feeling constantly uncertain and insignificant in the world. Man, you got to write this down. I'm going to read the whole thing, and I want you to fill in the blanks with your own personal core need and coping behavior. I need to have a sense of certainty and significance in my intimate relationship, and I'm not getting it. In order to fill this normal human need, I am coping by living with someone so that I can feel a little bit of certainty and a little bit of significance, so I can avoid feeling constantly uncertain and insignificant in the world. No one knew I was alive, maybe 5 people. And in order to get certainty and significance, I coped. What did you do? My living arrangement created an illusion that I'm in a committed relationship. The stone cold truth, the reality is I'm living with someone who doesn't want to marry me, and that's the antithesis of certain and the antithesis of significance. Get that. Here's the crazy thing. When you cope and when you settle for a little bit, I settled for a little bit of certainty and a little bit of significance in order to meet the need of certainty and significance. But the crazy thing is the truth of doing all of this coping is that the thing you're settling for a little bit actually sets you up for the antithesis. So I wanted a little bit of certainty, and I created this living cohabitation arrangement in order to get a little bit of certainty. But the reality is when you're living and cohabitating with someone who doesn't want to be with you, you are creating a mountain of uncertainty. The only thing sure about your situation is that it's uncertain and unstable. So in this desire to take this little crumb and make it into a meal, take this little bit of certainty and turn it into this, firm foundation of certainty, was that I was actually setting up the most uncertain situation in life. And by settling for a tiny bit of significance that this guy would come home to me, oh, blessed be. Oh, how grateful I should be that he would come home to poor old me under the stairs. I should be so grateful. He was giving me so much significance. No. By not wanting to marry me, by being willing to get me pregnant and then propose and unpropose. I mean, I was basically a womb, right? When I got pregnant, he proposed. When I lost the first pregnancy, he unproposed. He actually unproposed. Then I got pregnant again as a whoopsie daisy, and he kind of proposed again, but then kind of unproposed again. Talk about not being significant. Talk about someone to your face in the most vulnerable way possible, saying to you, you are insignificant. That is the trap of coping by settling for a little bit. You have nothing at all. Not only that, the thing that you want so badly is so far out of reach, you don't even realize it. So the stone cold truth is, the reality is I'm living with someone who doesn't want to marry me, and that is the antithesis of certainty and the antithesis of significance. The impact of the circumstance is I am now pregnant. You got to put that out there. I'm pregnant. And the consequence of showing up as someone who is willing to settle for uncertainty and insignificance in my intimate relationship is that I have broken trust with myself and with my unborn child. How do you like that? How do you like that? I had to face the fact that I purposefully was bringing a life into the world, into a battleground of uncertainty, insignificance. It wasn't only me that was insignificant to him, it was the child. And I was doing that. I did that. I set that up. How is that child ever going to trust me? How? And how could I ever trust myself? If in this moment, as I'm saying this, you're dealing with disappointment in yourself, disappointment in the circumstance, man, it felt like this watershed moment of just a bucket of disappointment being poured over my head. I was weighted down by it, by so much disappointment. I had had such high hopes. I had such high hopes for the relationship when I began it. I had such high hopes for the life growing inside me when I saw the 2 lines on the pregnancy test. I had such high hopes for the canvas the moment I saw it, but then saw that it arrived with a big giant black hole in it. I had such high hopes for my life when I was a child and I looked out into the future. And how had it all come to this? How had it come to this? But when I saw the canvas that said, I am made of shattered stars, and at the very same time I saw the whole, I felt a love and a commitment to that canvas in a way I don't know that I'd ever really known. In this unequivocal, despite its brokenness, I was going to keep this thing. It wasn't even a question. It overwhelmed me with its beauty. It overwhelmed me. And in a very strange way, I began to be overwhelmed about myself. In the short phrase, I am made of shattered stars, it told me everything I actually believed about myself at a core level. That I was beautiful, that I was shattered, that I was majestic, that I was fragile, that I was breathtaking, that I was broken, that I was divine, that I was dying, that I was a created being, and that I was a work of art. Despite my circumstances, despite the trust I had broken with others and myself and my unborn child, despite the feelings of unworthiness, somewhere deep inside, I felt worthy. It was a soft, small, quiet voice, but nonetheless, it was audible through it all. What if you are made of shattered stars? What if you are both a broken canvas, but a work of art? If you are in the workbook series, I want you to go to page 80 and fill in these questions. And if you don't have the workbook, that's okay. Get out a piece of paper right now, in the quiet of this moment, right now. How are you beautiful? How are you shattered? How are you majestic? How are you fragile? How are you breathtaking? How are you broken? How are you divine? How are you dying? In what ways are you a created being? And in what ways are you a work of art? If you are listening to this, if you are watching this, I want you to just hit pause on the video and come back in a moment because we're going to go on. There's a little bit more. But in the quietness of this moment, I don't want you to advance without answering those questions. How are you beautiful, shattered, majestic, fragile, breathtaking, broken, divine, dying, created, and a work of art? We're going to come back and look at the gaping hole that was created in your life and talk about a new possibility. But for right now, pause the tape, take a minute, answer the questions, and come back for more. If you are back from the break, we're going to talk about 2 final concepts, and then that brings us to the end of the chapter, Broken Canvas. And then we're going to go into a chapter called The Fall and the Funk. We're going to keep digging. We're going to keep on this excavation dig. Do not stop now. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. But right now we're going to look at the gaping hole. So that canvas arrived with a gaping hole. Something shot through one side and exited the other. In cop shows, they call that a through and through. It goes in one side and out the other. The bullet doesn't stay lodged in, but it creates a hole so big that you can see through to the other side. A hole is defined as a space or opening that goes all the way through something. That is the gaping hole of your life. What caused this hole? What left a hole in your life? How have you sustained damage? In what way has that damage left a hole, left a through and through, left a hole so large you can see light through the other side? What is no longer there because of this hole? That hole removes something. That hole takes something away. For me, I named my baby Lumen, which is a derivative of the word light. And for me, I lost that pregnancy. She was no longer there. And I was left with a painting with a hole in it. The loss of that child created a hole in me. And I had to write that down. Secondarily, a new possibility opened in my life that I didn't expect. When I called the artist, I was still pregnant. And I said to him, hey, listen, this thing has happened. I've got this canvas with a big hole in it and I don't know what to do. And when he offered to make a new one and I said, no, I wanted the one that I had gotten. I wanted the image. I wanted the canvas in front of me. I did not want to exchange it for anything else. Nothing else would have fit this canvas. If I had gotten something different, it would have been something entirely different. I wanted not only the canvas, I wanted the hole. I wanted the gaping hole. They went together. That work of art in my mind was never without a hole. The hole was with it. It came with it. It was part of the canvas. And I didn't want another one. And when I said that to him with such conviction, and he was like, okay. And I said, but can you help me repair it? He hadn't done something like this before. He wasn't in the business of fixing people's canvases from, he was on the East Coast, I was on the West Coast. What was the plan there? What was my plan? But I posed the question because I believed in my heart of hearts that the canvas had to be repairable. It just had to be. I was convinced of it. And the new possibility that opened up when I said to this artist, can I repair it? Can you help me? Within a millisecond, he said, I think we can fix that together. And from that point forward, he created a repair kit for me and sent it in my direction with a video. And he said, call me when you get this. And I laid out the repair kit. I had watched his video and I called that artist. And in that connection, from two sides of one nation, we co-created that work of art. That was the new possibility that I, a mother who had realized that I was in an uncertain, insignificant circumstance with this giant gaping hole, with this deep brokenness in my life that went layers and layers and layers deep. I became someone different. I became a co-creator of a work of art. And that metaphor of co-creation, of this beautiful work of art, of I am made of shattered stars, took root in my life and became the spine of this workbook and the reality that you are a created being, that you are a work of art. And if you just take up that co-creation, you too can co-create a beautiful life. In the last part of Broken Canvas, I want you to write down, what would it mean to be a co-creator of your life? What would it mean? There's this beautiful verse in the Bible in Jeremiah 1:5, and it says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. What if you had a creator What if not when you were in the womb I knew you, before I formed you in the womb I knew you? Before. And from that knowingness, before you were formed, you were brought into life. You were known before you were formed. And now you are out in the world living a life, and you have the ability to partner and co-create the creation of your life. You are not out of effect. So the question is, what would it mean to be a co-creator in your life? And as the last bit of broken canvas, I want you to consider yourself visually and imagine yourself and your life as a work of art. What would it be like? As a sculpture, as a dance, as a song, as a painting? What colors and textures conjure up the emotions you feel about who you are and the events of your life? So in the From the Core workbook, in the first book, Reckoning, which contains this chapter, Broken Canvas, there is a huge 2-page spread, and I'm going to show it for those of you watching on video. And it says, use this space to express yourself creatively. You can use paint or glue and cutouts. You can write down words or use pieces of letters or emails sent to you, or you can just use the space to write. This blank canvas is all yours to co-create as you like. So on that note, I'm going to leave you, but join me again. We're going to talk about the fall and the funk. That's coming up next. I don't know about you, but I feel so hopeful about the future that we're creating together and individually. You are not alone in this journey, but for the next couple of minutes or hour or week, I want you to enjoy and relish in the idea of co-creating a life.